Welcome into the PHNX Cardinals Podcast, presented to you by the DraftKings Sportsbook app, America's top-rated sportsbook. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star wherever you get your podcasts. Johnny Venerable, Bo Brock, on a flippin' loaded Tuesday of news and information pertaining to the Arizona Cardinals and what may come to be, Bo Brock, the next head coach of this franchise. And I think we got to start with the ex-Falcon current defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, Dan Quinn, who probably right now is in Phoenix, in Tempe, meeting with Michael Bidwill and company.
Yeah, are they eating their steaks with a fork and knife? I do not eat my Snickers with a fork and knife. Arizona animal, that is false. I can confirm that I do not do that. But as far as Dan Quinn, are they going to be out at Steak 44 where they used to wine and dine their old candidates, or is the new Michael Bidwill, has he found a new restaurant to take his candidates and free agents, draft prospects that he wants to court? I don't know. But Dan Quinn, as far as I'm concerned, great coordinator, one of the best coordinators in the NFL, but he's not a head coach, in my opinion. We've seen play out. I think there's a ceiling to it. I like that the Arizona Cardinals are interviewing him. I think that this is really just kind of the first interview, right? They messaged each other. They swiped right on each other, right?
They're on AIM.
This is the first date. I know they said second interview because he had pretty much a fire drill Zoom meeting type thing on Saturday before his game on Sunday, but I'm not buying too much into it. That was just pleasantries and just seeing if they wanted to move forward with this. And apparently they did. But as far as legitimate candidate, I'll say it right now, I just don't think Dan Quinn is a legitimate candidate for this head coaching job with the Arizona Cardinals.
Can I just say this? Dan Quinn can be both two things can be true. He's not our favorite candidate, but we like that they're playing in the sandbox of the elite candidates for these jobs. Dan Quinn turned away opportunities last year, wanted to go back to Dallas. It's presumed he's going to take a job if it's offered to him this hiring cycle. So I like that we're playing in the Payton sandbox that we're going to get to. They attempted to meet with D'Amico. Obviously, they're meeting with Dan Quinn. Like, these are the elites. These are the blue chippers in this coaching cycle. Now, some are higher, thought of than others. Jim Harbaugh's removed his name, but this is not, with all due respect, Vance Joseph and Frank Wright. This is a guy who took it to San Francisco and company in their building, held them to 19 points, and his team lost. Right. The defense has been on fire since he took over, in 2021? He's a great defensive coordinator. And also, and I put this out on Twitter, he knows the division, right? He knows Kyle Shanahan, clearly. Great game plan over the weekend. And he knows Pete Carroll because he was on the staff that won the Super Bowl with the Legion of Boom and company. I don't know his relationship with Sean McVay. I would imagine he's had success at one time or another. And he did go to a Super Bowl with Atlanta. Everybody wants to point to Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan runs the ball in the second half. Dan Quinn's a Super Bowl winning head coach. So I'm higher on Dan Quinn than you. Is he my first candidate? No, but I would put him on the same level as Brian Flores.
I don't want to poo-poo Dan Quinn head coaching candidate. I'm not trying
to
do that.
You're pooping all over it to start the show.
There's a difference here. It's who I want and then who's available and who are, legitimate candidates here. And I think Dan Quinn absolutely deserves an interview and absolutely should be a head coach going forward. But I believe that there's a ceiling there. And I think that Michael Bidwill moving off of Cliff Kingsbury earlier this offseason, first chance he got, Black Monday morning, he fired Cliff Kingsbury and sent a message to the Arizona Cardinals fan base that they're not going to settle for a ceiling of mediocrity. And I think Dan Quinn is a level up from Cliff Kingsbury, no doubt about it. He's a level up, but he also has a ceiling.
You just answered your own question. Is he an improvement on Cliff Kingsbury? Because
we're not looking for an improvement on Cliff Kingsbury. What Michael Bidwill said is he's looking for the best coach possible for the franchise, and I don't think Dan Quinn is that. Dan Quinn in his final couple seasons with Atlanta, 14-23, right? Without Kyle Shanahan as his offensive coordinator, and a major part of being a successful head coach in this league is playing with a lead and putting away teams, and he simply couldn't do that as a head coach. You can blame the OC, but at the end of the day, it falls on the shoulders of the head coach. And he couldn't do that. Dan Quinn's Falcons teams, Johnny, they blew leads of 25 in the Super Bowl, 28-3. We all know that number. He blew a 20-point lead to the Dallas Cowboys in the regular season, and he blew a lead of 17 points 3 separate times. That's just not getting it done. When it comes down to it, when it comes to crunch time, insulting away games, Dan Quinn's teams couldn't do that. That's his ceiling. Great coordinator. He's a good head coach. I hope the Arizona Cardinals sights are a little bit bigger than Dan Quinn.
A little bit bigger for a team that was just 4-13 right now. That it's
but
part
look
of the
at the candidates
that
are
NFL.
available. That's what I'm saying.
Well, they're interviewing those candidates. He's
right.
part of that group. He's in the set. He's in the tier. He belongs in this tier. And it's great that they're interviewing him and not settling for some of these lesser candidates. They're not interviewing Frank Wright again today, because Dan Quinn could be the head coach of the Denver Broncos. He could be the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. He could go to a bunch of different teams. The Cardinals should be in that mix, Bo. Let me just be frank about something. Dan Quinn, in his first run as a head coach, went to a Super Bowl. And so I would imagine after his stint with Dallas, he's going to be why do we give Brian Flores, including myself, the benefit of the doubt that he's going to be a better head coach the second time around? I love the idea of doubling down on these coaches that have had success once upon a time. For whatever reason, it flamed out a little bit. I mean, real success. Brian Flores and Dan Quinn had real success. Cliff Kingsbury, we know, last season was a farce. It was not who he is. It was a flash in the pan. So now I would rather reinvest. Yes, there are hot candidates every year. But as our buddy Benjamin Albright on the show said, there's a big difference between being a hot coordinator and being a head coach. And I've seen Dan Quinn cultivate a locker room en route to the Super Bowl. Now, you can make an argument. So did Ken Whisenhunt once upon a time. And he took another job. What was it with the Chargers, maybe the Titans? That didn't work out so well. So is he a Ken Whisenhunt, or is he one of these coaches that get better and better every time they get opportunities and they gain experience? He is not my first candidate. I think I might want Brian Flores ahead of him, frankly. But
yes,
don't tell me what I should do. I like that they're in these discussions. And I saw a lot of meh on social media today. It's like, guys, DeMeco Ryans, I'm going to put it to you bluntly, is not going to be the head coach of the Cardinals. That's my opinion. The Cardinals had their window to talk to DeMeco Ryans. They fucked it up. And by all accounts, Benjamin Albright and company, he's going to be the head coach of the Houston Texans or the Denver Broncos, or he's not going to be a head coach this hiring cycle. You guys can throw eggs at me if the Cardinals get an interview next week, and I'll wave the white flag. Yeah. DeMeco Ryans is not coming here. They blew that. So if we're contextualizing it now and saying, okay, who are the major players? Because we talked about it on Sunday's audio only podcast. It was like Brian Flores, and then there were no sleepers. Well, here are some sleepers. Everybody wake up for some sleepers. Sean Payton and now Dan Quinn in Arizona meet with Michael Bidwill and Monti Ossenfort. We have to take that seriously.
I think Dan Quinn is the equivalent of settling for the Arizona Cardinals.
It's not.
Yes, it is. I understand. I get your point. I absolutely get your point that, he's a solid candidate, but he shouldn't be the guy given who's available. And if it's not DeMeco Ryans, I would still take Dan Quinn over Brian Flores in this "what have you done for me lately" league, because Brian Flores has been far more successful than Dan Quinn was at the end of his tenure as the Atlanta Falcons head coach. Dan Quinn was he wasn't competitive. I think it was a perfect storm of Dan Quinn getting there, being a different voice, being able to lead that defense, and he got peak Matt Ryan, peak Julio Jones. He got Kyle Shanahan after a weird stint, because after his dad got fired in Washington and he was looking for work, and he fell into the lap of the Atlanta Falcons. It was just a perfect storm to kind of set off Dan Quinn's coaching tenure, and then he fell apart. He went 7-9, he went 7-9, and then he went 0-5, and then he was done. He couldn't keep leads, he couldn't put games away, even with more talent on his roster. I mean, that's not. I like that he's in the conversation. You should interview a guy like Dan Quinn, but for all I'm concerned, he can go and reunite with Russell Wilson. They were together in Seattle at one point, in Denver, and they can go live happily ever after in third place for the next 4 to 5 years.
I watched Cooper Rush win games for Dallas this year, and it wasn't because of the offense that got it done. It was the defense. It kept their season alive. And I would argue, listen, I like a lot of their players, but like outside of Micah Parsons, I don't think they have legitimate elite defensive personnel.
Trayvon Diggs had like 87 interceptions last year.
He got burned. He's a great player. Okay. But
yes.
Their unit, I would say, is pretty comparable to what Arizona has. Now, Arizona doesn't have a Micah Parsons, but I don't think Dallas is that much more talented defensively than Arizona. I think they're much better coach, significantly better. Whereas I look at a San Francisco and they got elite players up and down, and that's not an indictment of D'Amico Ryans. Listen, I think we're both saying the same thing here in different ways.
I mean, you're wrong and I'm right.
No, we like Dan Quinn. We like that he's in the mix.
I like him.
He's not our first choice, but we like him. Right. Who do we love? Who do they
friend zoning
love?
him. I'm going to friend zone Dan Quinn. I don't want to have a serious relationship with him. Look, as far as like, are they major players for Dan Quinn? Are the Arizona Cardinals major players for Dan Quinn?
Yes.
No.
Yes, they are.
No, he's an impressive candidate. He looks great on paper. He probably interviews well. Everybody seems to want to have a second interview with him. He's a level up from Cliff Kingsbury, but he's not the highest level. When you have candidates out there like Sean Payton, you still have to have those conversations. I'm not buying that this is a sign that he's a significant candidate for the Arizona Cardinals head coaching vacancy.
He made enough of an impression on that Zoom call, albeit 60 minutes, Saturday, and then the performance that they gave out on Sunday, that the Cardinals said, you, right there, we want to get you in Arizona, come and we're going to wine and dine you. Give us 4 hours of your time. We're going to get the whole spiel. Listen,
they were interviewing on a shot clock, and they figured out that we can further this conversation. Let's have a meal of food together. Let's sit across from each other, see if we can continue to have this conversation. And that's fine. Have a true conversation with Dan Quinn in person at Steak 44 or wherever it may be. That's great. But I'm not about to go throw some shekels down on the DraftKings Sportsbook app for Dan Quinn at plus 1,200. To bet to be the next Cardinals head coach.
Some of you need to understand, and by some of you I mean Bo, last week's interviews were not real. They weren't real interviews. The interviews are starting this week. Whether you want to call it the first round or the second round, Brian Flroes meeting with the Cardinals yesterday, real interview. Dan Quinn today, doubling down, real interview. A guy by the name of Sean Payton in the house in Arizona on Thursday, real interview. The major players are playing this week. With all due respect to our guy Avero last week and Aaron Glenn with the Detroit Lions on Saturday and Frank Wright, Vance Joseph, it was almost just like that was spring training. That was batting practice for the big show. Get ready for the big dance because these are the major players right now. And we're going to talk about Sean Payton here in a second. But Bo just mentioned it, the DraftKings Sportsbook app. It's where it's at. Unfortunately, you can't bet on the Cardinals in the conference championship game, but you can get future head coaching odds. Right now, the favorite to become the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, plus 115. Brian Flroes, Sean Payton up to 250. If you want to dabble on that and more, check out DraftKings with PHNX. The two conference championship games are en route. Only a few more shots, guys, to win big on the playoffs with DraftKings, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Counting down, ladies and gentlemen, to Super Bowl 57 here in the desert. New customers can bet just $5, get $200 in free bets instantly if you do. You don't have to win. You can bet the spread, the money line, what have you. $5. Chiefs, Bengals, Niners, God forbid, the Eagles. If you're a new customer, promo code PHNX, $200 in free bets instantly. That's only with DraftKings, only with promo code PHNX. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details, Bo.
If Dan Quinn becomes the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, I'll chug not one, but 2 beers at our last Wednesday at Four Peaks. Tomorrow is our last Wednesday of January. We're restarting this thing. We're excited to get back out there to the 8th Street in Tempe. Four Peaks Brewery, have some of our favorite beers, the Kilt Lifter, the Wow. You got the Wow Wheat for $3. Just say that you're hanging out with the PHNX crew and then come hang out with us. Let's talk about this Arizona Cardinals head coaching vacancy. Claycomb 91, I'll tell you why I'm not all in on Quinn as a legit candidate, as I've been saying for most of the show. Come see us out at Four Peaks, have a beer with us, have some chicken tendies or some of their other delicious menu items at Four Peaks. You got to check it out for yourself. Check it out online as well, fourpeaks.com, and check out their new beers as well, the Recreational Juice. It's Dank IPA, or their new beer, the Staycation Super Juicy IPA, getting you ready for this summer when you're going to be sticking around and just taking on the heat, but cooling yourself off with a super juicy IPA. Last Wednesdays are back here for the PHNX crew and yourself. Join us at the 8th Street Pub on January 25th, tomorrow. All our shows are going to be live in person throughout the day. $3 beer specials. Come say hi, talk Cards football with us as long as you'd like to. Tomorrow at Four Peaks, 8th Street in Tempe.
Everybody, when they come out to Four Peaks and they talk to us, they always tell me, Johnny, I thought you were going to be shorter. And they tell Bo, I thought you were going to be taller. So those are fun conversations that we like to have. But come out, let's have a good time. Ramping it back up this offseason. Juicy fun at Four Peaks. Juicy fun on the Twitter streets this morning, Bo Brock, with relation to candidate numero uno, Sean Payton, via Benjamin Albright, who covers the NFL and the Denver Broncos, posting this on Twitter today. Quote, from everything I've heard, it doesn't appear Sean Payton has much of a market. The jobs he wanted didn't open outside of Denver. We'll see about AZ. There has not been much interest. Strong possibility he goes back to TV. But then, Bo, he follows up with this. I'm going to read this off of my notes here. Quote, with all the stuff flying around today about Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos, I would say this about the Broncos and Sean Payton. With Sean Payton not having a scheduled in-person interview, it would suggest that the Broncos' focus is elsewhere at this time. Our guy, Howard Balzer, of course, broke the news yesterday that Payton was coming to Arizona on Thursday to meet with Sean Payton, then doubled down after our show and said, not only was that happening, but hey, folks in Denver, pump the brakes. That interview is delayed, inevitably postponed, albeit maybe canceled. Sean Payton is not going to connect with the Denver Broncos this week. Maybe talks have kind of fizzled out, which means, Bo Brock, the only thing left standing on this schedule with Sean Payton is a trip to the Valley on Thursday.
Stars are aligning, aren't they? The stars are aligning. Walmart is taking their khakis and their blue light specials and their slogan,
great value franchise out of
and they're
here.
taking it. And they're going to hire Dan Quinn, and they're going to live in mediocrity, and they're going to have one of the longest postseason droughts continue with their washed quarterback and their defensive coordinator head coach. Go ahead and do it. It's curious. I'm curious to think, did our guy Howard Balzer and his breaking of that news, did it torpedo talks between Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos? Did they feel slighted that he was willing to talk to the Cardinals? Because they probably feel like, okay, we're negotiating against ourselves right now. It doesn't seem to be anybody else in the conversation right now. You could still find it on the DraftKings Sportsbook app that I believe he's minus 125 to be the next head coach of the Broncos, right? Now those odds shifted back in favor of the Cardinals as well. I think I last saw he was plus 250 to become the next Cardinals head coach. So not a whole lot of people know where he's going, but the odds continue to kind of vary a little bit with Sean Payton and where he could potentially coach next year. But it feels like Michael Bidwill might have slow played himself into a pretty good spot here. Worst case scenario, Sean Payton goes back to TV. You didn't miss out on the biggest fish as far as the coaching candidates go, or you could potentially get him as your next head coach and kind of taking your franchise quarterback and getting him back on track in Kyler Murray.
Like everybody spitting out like a hyperbole, this narrative that, well, you couldn't have any executives in place because you want Sean to pick everybody. I've been of the mindset, like, maybe if you wanted one singular guy, that would have been the right move. But I feel like they're best equipped now to court Sean on Thursday. Dave Sears, a guy with a lot of success in Detroit, a lengthy resume in the NFL. Of course, Monti Ossenfort, the new GM. As much as I like Michael Bidwill and his ability to write fat checks, I want football people in front of Sean Payton to convince him, we know what we're doing. Please help us. Let's win a championship here. Not Michael Bidwill by himself. And I feel like that's a deterrent right now with Denver. These Walmart people, these new owners, yes, they've got a lot of cash. But listen, at the end of the day, it's going to be $25 million wherever he goes. It's about winning championships. He wants to get into the Hall of Fame. You think his best route into the Hall of Fame and trying to win another Super Bowl is entering a division with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes and the gauntlet of AFC quarterbacks? Did you see the quarterback play in the NFC this year? It's Brock fucking Purdy, right? It's Daniel Jones won a playoff game.
Right.
He knows the NFC. And supposedly Carolina, like that was due diligence. Seems like they're kind of out of Sean Payton right now. We could be 48 hours away from this tide turning completely in favor of the Arizona Cardinals, assuming the compensation isn't a problem. And it sounds like it's not, because you get to this point, there's an understanding from Michael Bidwill and company like, yeah, we got to give up draft picks. Yeah, we know how much Sean is asking for with his salary. I wonder if this was purposely done by Bidwill and company and Sean Payton. Like, let me vet everybody else first. I'll come to you last. Give me your best offer, your best pitch. Let's see if we can work something out. I mean, you've got to feel about as optimistic as you felt as a Cardinal fan if you want Sean Payton than even when the search even started, because we've avoided all these landmines of like, is Brandon Staley going to get fired? Is Sean McVay going to walk away? What's going on with Mike McCarthy? Turns out none of that happened. And then now, apparently, the Denver Broncos, there's reports now, people around the NFL are leaking this out, like Russell Wilson is washed. You're going to hitch your wagon to a quarterback. Like, listen, Kyler Murray's not perfect, but he's not damaged goods. He's going to be back next year, and he's in his mid-20s, and it's the NFC. Right. You're going to hitch your wagon to an expensive older player in Russell Wilson. You got Colin Cowherd today, who talks with Sean Payton, like him or not, completely flipping his tone, saying, I passed on the Denver Broncos. Yeah. So you've got to feel at least semi-optimistic that Thursday you've got a shot to make an impression.
Absolutely. I mean, the way that they were evaluating Russell Wilson at the end of last season was, he made a couple good throws here. It was like how we evaluated Josh Rosen his rookie season. Yeah. There wasn't like a full game's worth of film where you're like, there's Russ. There's the guy that we recognize from all those years in Seattle. No. And we're seeing for a second straight offseason that the Denver Broncos and this ownership that we keep on being told is steady, instead of that they just have deep pockets, that they kind of just get schooled in the NFL. This is the NFL. This isn't Walmart. This isn't, big superstores. This is the NFL, and they're chewing them up and they're spitting them out. And they thought that they were the only team and only that was going to be courting Sean Payton. And Payton's group, they knew that. So they had to conjure up something. And where we were sitting here last week at this time saying, where's the Payton interview? What's happening here? And it's the same thing. It's from The Departed, like in the Scorsese film with Leonardo DiCaprio. How do you spot a cop? You just ask him. He says he's not a cop. Like, that was the Arizona Cardinals, right? They were just waiting for their opportunity. They're letting the Denver Broncos kind of get the headlines for all last week. But like you said, this is the week. This is where the interviews are ramping up. This is where you can separate the legitimate candidates from the pretenders out there. And the Arizona Cardinals can very well make themselves the legit, maybe top seeded contender for Sean Payton's services in 2023 on Thursday.
You would remember the Ken Whisenhunt Peyton Manning sweepstakes, and the Cardinals were one of the first teams to meet with Peyton, but it wasn't until the end when Peyton got in house with John Elway and they sealed the deal. And they were one of the last people, the last organizations to meet with Peyton Manning. You're of the benefit to be last in line. Sean Payton now has no remaining interviews with teams outside of Thursday, right? Carolina, and we're going to talk about this. Bo and I are going to give our predictions of what we think is going to go down in our next segment. Carolina, the favorite is Sean Stetchen, or the Eagles offensive coordinator, Shane Stetchen. Yeah, butchered his name 3 times. The offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Mike Kafka's getting multiple interviews there. Like Sean Payton, I think a lot of teams now, the longer this goes on, the easier it is for teams and fans, because we've seen it, to talk themselves out of Sean Payton. Sean Payton, I think, had a lot of glitz and glamour in November and December. And then as these teams meet with other candidates and they look at their resume and they say, hey, you did a lot of good stuff this year and you're free in terms of draft compensation, and we have to pay you a fraction of what we pay Sean Payton, it's easy to walk back commitments. And I saw it in the chat, Bo and I were texting about this off air. The Saints have overplayed their hand. Yeah. They have butchered this. This went from maybe a day 2 pick to multiple 1s and 2s. Get the hell out of here with that. Right. No one is paying you that. Sean's compensation is taken care of. It's not our money. Pay him whatever he needs. Let him go to work. But the Saints mystery team garbage that Diana Rossini, who I believe, believes this because she was told this, of ESPN, saying that there's a team out there just waiting. No, there's not. There's 5 teams with openings. No one else is getting fired. McCarthy's safe. Nothing. This is just the Saints attempting to drum up, as we saw from our guy Benjamin Albright, to drum up a market for Sean Payton that could only be after Thursday, Cardinals or bust.
I just don't. I see in the chat and everybody's killing it, but I see, he has become such a polarizing name from this fan base, and they get scared off by the sticker price for Sean Payton. But look, the Cardinals can negotiate this thing. And yes, to your point, as far as them overplaying this hand brutally, I mean, it's at the end of the day, the best head coach for Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals to expedite a rebuild and find their way out of the last place in the NFC West and contending with these teams that are coached by Pete Carroll and Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay is Sean Payton. I mean, that's your best option. That remains your best option. And you start to figure out, what's realistic compensation, because, if the Broncos go ahead and hire somebody between now and the end of the week, they're out of the picture. And Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland and the brass there in New Orleans know that it's either if Sean Payton wants to coach this season, you can't hold him hostage. This was a guy that did wonders, unbelievable things in a city that needed it for close to 2 decades. You can't hold him hostage because you want to capitalize as much as you possibly can. Plus, and many people have admitted this, like, next year it becomes a completely different conversation. He's under contract through 2024, but if he hits the open market again next year, you pretty much get nothing. It's you strike now and you try to get as much as you can. If it's like a second or third, that's fine, or a future first, that's great. And if you're a Cardinals fan, I think that's a simple answer. If you can get a coach the caliber of Sean Payton, you do it.
Sean Payton's spending these picks too, so he's not setting up the Cardinals or whomever in a position to be, guys, my ego's so big, you guys need to give up 3 1s, and then I'm going to come take over the team. No, that's not how this is going to go. If Sean Payton has a banger of an interview Thursday, and we're going to fast forward, and Friday morning he meets with his family, he meets with his wife and his kids, and he says, I'm going to take the job with the Arizona Cardinals. He calls up Mickey Loomis and the ownership for the Saints and says, make a deal with the Cardinals. I'm going to take the job. And what are the Saints going to do? No, you either do that or he says, I'm going back to Fox. I don't like the Broncos. Right. I didn't get a good vibe from the Panthers. This is the job I want. Get what you can for me. I appreciate everything. Write a thank you note. He'll be in the Ring of Honor. What are the Saints going to do? The Cardinals are going to know from Sean Payton that they're his team and he's their guy. So you try to save face and you get, maybe a first next year or 2 and a 2, whatever. But it's just like if you wait, you get less. It's common practice. Yeah. The Saints are already cashing these draft picks before they get them. The fan base there, it's just like, guys, they're not pitting these teams against each other. The Saints, everything that you read in the media on Twitter streets, this is the Saints trying to drum up interest that's not there. And it's Sean's decision at the end of the day. Right. It absolutely is. What do you think that Denver was balking at as far as Sean Payton? You think it was the asking price as far as draft pick compensation? It's the price tag year to year, what his salary would be, 20 to 25 million? I wonder if Sean just wasn't overly interested with them, and in an effort to save face, he is allowing them to say, you know what, we're not interested in you. Because Benjamin Albright on his Twitter said that the ownership likes Sean, the football people want Dan Quinn. Right? The players there, a lot of them want Dan Quinn. Russell wants Sean Payton because he wants his career saved. Right. But when stuff gets out, guys, it's out on purpose. They want it to get out. And everything today has been damage control. When Sean Payton cancels the interview, the Broncos are out there telling everybody today, no, we don't love him. We like him, but we're doing our due diligence, blah, blah, blah. No. My guess is Sean met with them. Initially was going to meet with them again and said, you know what, why am I wasting my time? Now that could change, but I think Dan Quinn is destined, even with his interview today, to be the next head coach of that team. He was a finalist last year. They foolishly picked Nathaniel Hackett. They wanted to go the sexy coordinator route or for an offensive guy. They thought they were getting Aaron Rodgers, so they bring in one of his position coaches. I think Dan Quinn is going to be the next head coach of the Denver Broncos. So then it just becomes, Sean, do you want to coach next year? Or do you want to go back to TV? Because if you coach in Arizona, unlike Denver, you can bring in Vic Fangio. Right. Yeah, you could. And that would be huge. What Fangio could do with this defense, with the pieces already in place, and what Sean could do with the offense. 10 of his 16 seasons or 15 seasons, because he had to sit out the 1 year because of Bountygate. It was a top 10 offense. I mean, what he does offensively, his game plans, and the way that he works with quarterbacks. He worked obviously with Drew Brees and was able to work with guys like Teddy Bridgewater and Jameis Winston at the end of his tenure in New Orleans. I mean, those guys haven't had better success in their careers before that. So I think you still have to keep that idea open, that Sean Payton, what he could do and get this offense and Kyler Murray back on track is what you really want from your next head coach. Because other than that, you're looking at a bunch of
solid leaders, right? Guys more with defensive backgrounds. And then you really have to figure out and do your homework on who's going to be the offensive guy to help get Kyler Murray back on track, because that becomes just as important as who your head coach is.
I saw a comment earlier. I guess Tom Pelissaro from NFL Network put out a report saying that Avero and Frank Wright and Aaron Glenn are all still in the mix for the Cardinal job. They're not. They're not getting this job. At least that's not what I believe. Frank Wright is interviewing for OC jobs. If he comes here, maybe he's Brian Flores' offensive coordinator. Avero is not ready to be a head coach, presumably, and Aaron Glenn's defense was almost as bad as Vance Joseph's. That's not going to be the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. If the Cardinals offer Dan Quinn, Dan Quinn's accepting the job. If the Cardinals offer Brian Flores is accepting the job. They've got legitimate candidates, fallbacks, if they aren't able to lure Sean Payton or if they don't want Sean Payton after Thursday. And if he goes to the Denver Broncos, Bo Brock, and something turns around and it is a leverage play, people who don't want Dan Quinn, you better buckle up, because I think that becomes increasingly likely if Dan Quinn doesn't end up in Denver, that he couldn't end up in Arizona, because he's not turning down a job 2 years in a row, especially with Dallas. I mean, Dallas is maxed out. I think this roster that they have, they're paying Dak a bunch of money. They got to rework Zeke's contract, cut him outright. They're going to try to fill holes. Like, I don't think Dan Quinn could have a better resume after 2 years than what he's done in Dallas. So if after, especially we use the Byron Leftwich example all the time, you got to go get a job. So if he gets passed over, like, he's taking the Cardinal job. I guarantee it. He wouldn't interview with them if he wasn't interested.
I don't doubt that at all. It's a great point as far as the Cardinals candidates go, still in the belief that it would have to be not a doomsday scenario, but you're right. If he doesn't get the Broncos job, if Peyton, the betting favorite, ends up going to Denver, then then you've got Dan Quinn. It's weird because every draft season, you've got guys that you tab as can't miss, top 5, top 10 draft picks that are waiting in the green room in the 20s, right? There's guys that people just didn't think about, that organizations view differently. And we're going to see probably one or two of these can't miss head coaching candidates of this coordinator crop, or guys that have coached before that aren't going to be head coaches of teams next year. I don't know if it's Dan Quinn. I don't know if it's DeMeco Ryans. I don't know if it's Sean Payton, but it's very realistic that one or two of those guys is either in their same job that they are this season, next season, or just doing something different, because that's just how some of these things work out. Like, some organizations aren't in on these guys and as big on these guys as everybody else is.
Good comments in the chat. We encourage you to keep the comments coming. Please like this video. It helps us share around the YouTube algorithm. Bucky Bird asking, are you guys concerned that Sean Payton could walk away after 3 to 4 years if things don't go well record-wise? Of course, that's always a concern, especially if you give up premium draft capital. What if Kyler Murray and he have a falling out? What if they can't get the quarterback right? That's always a concern. But I think you would rather have that gamble with a guy who has consistently had above 500 records for a franchise that doesn't have enough winning in their history. I think, again, you can a lot of these candidates, you can play it safe with a Frank Wright and say this guy made the playoffs in the AFC South and blah. Sean Payton, you're hiring Sean Payton and trading for him to help bring a Super Bowl to Arizona. That's what you're doing.
And also, I mean, that's what I was cautioning yesterday, where you were joking about it's not our money, it's Michael Bidwill's money, and he's going to be fine. But it gets a little bit trickier than Cliff Kingsbury, making around $7.5 million when Sean Payton's making the buyout is significantly higher if shit hits the fan. Like, if you're paying him $20 to $25 million a season and it's guaranteed for 4 years, I mean, you're looking at close to $100 million there in buyouts. So that's the huge risk. But I think Payton's worth, obviously that risk with his draft.
Eris in the chat, has Ryans rescheduled the Arizona interview? He has not.
No.
And I would just caution everybody with the expectations of DeMeco Ryans. It just, again, I don't have the source. It just feels like that ship has sailed. I would say if you're reading the tea leaves and the writing on the wall, that they didn't prioritize him for whatever reason. I also think there's influence from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch that, hey, you don't want to go work for the Cardinals, right? You got options. You're going to go work for Houston, who drafted you, go to the AFC. They probably want him out of the NFC. I think if you're hoping that DeMeco Ryans is the next head coach of the Cardinals, you're going to be disappointed. And it just, I think there's a better chance that DeMeco Ryans exits this hiring cycle without a job than I think he's the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, which is crazy.
I want to debut our graphic real quick while you have a chance of that. Michael Bidwill is a man of his word, and he is casting a large net. There it is. There it is.
It's some elite Photoshop work by whom put that together. That is elite.
I won't even say that producer Emma put that together, because she is way more talented than that.
She might quit the show if we tell her. If we say that. that is our own Bo Brock, who spent all morning neglecting his kid to put that together, and we love him for it. We also love all of you. Underdog Fantasy wants to see you dabbling this weekend ahead of the divisional round, ahead of the conference championship round, because Underdog does daily fantasy sports differently in the sense that you can draft your team against 5 of your buddies. The highest scoring squad for the night wins that cold, hard cash. Or, if you're NFL, you don't want to bet against the Niners, you want to watch that game, I don't blame you. All you got to do, draft up to 6 NBA players. Suns are hot, no positional limits. That's it. Cam Johnson, little Chris Paul action. It's fantastic. Pivot off a year-long fantasy. Daily fantasy sports is where it's at. It's where we're at. And we're at Underdog Fantasy. Like, I don't know, will Chris Paul hit the higher of his assists for the evening? Will DeAndre Ayton hit the higher of his rebounds? Will hopefully Brock Purdy hit the higher of his interceptions on Sunday? It's super easy to get started, guys. All you got to do, go to UnderdogFantasy.com, download the app, sign up with promo code PHNX, and get this. Underdog is going to match your first deposit up to $100. Type in the promo code PHNX, deposit some funds up to $100, and bam, doubling your first deposit up to $100. Bet with that right away. Cash out your original funds. Have a great time. Underdog Fantasy is where it's at. Promo code PHNX. Receive that deposit match and get in on the action today.
The Phoenix Suns are heating up. The PHNX Suns podcast is in fuego. Suns taking on a poverty franchise, Michael Jordan's Charlotte Hornets tonight. Make sure you're checking out our friends Saul, Espo, the whole crew tonight as they break down that game, pregame, and of course their postgame. Also, you got to check out our friends over at OG's Brands. OG's Brands, Arizona's favorite cannabis kitchen. We've got our, casting the net graphic. If you pop an OG's, that thing just goes crazy with the dolphin sounds and the beautiful ocean. If you've got an OG's, if you pop one of those, that's going to be an unbelievable experience. Every experience under OG's is something special, and it's also tailored to what you need. You got it available in the indica, you got it available in the sativa, and they've got a brand new flavor coming out. The official strawberries and cream is hitting shelves soon. Always, you can find them at your local dispensary, but I highly encourage you check it out at ogsbrands.com. That's OGEEZ brands.com. You got some of the best flavor options available. You got all the fruits, the tropicals, you got the watermelons, raspberry and orange. You got the orange creamsicle, one of their all-time favorites, or you got something that can help you get to sleep and stay asleep. They got their sleep time gummy. It's the aquaberry flavor. Check that out if you're dealing with maybe some insomnia, but get out there to your local dispensary. Check out everything OG's Brands has to offer. ogsbrands.com. That's ogsbrands.com, and checking them out on IG as well. Instagram at OG's Brands.
Well, let's talk these head coaching openings, and let's give the people in the chat, the people out there, our thoughts, Bo, of who the next coach of the Cardinals is going to be amongst these 5 openings. Last year, there was 10. This year, right now, as of January 24th, there are still 5 alive right now. And here are our official predictions as of today. I will go first.
Okay.
Drum roll, please. Okay. Predicting the 5 vacant NFL openings. This is my best guess. This isn't what I hope happens. This isn't what I'm wagering on. This is me telling all of you, this is what I think is going to happen. I think Jonathan Gannon is going to be the next head coach of the Houston Texans. They have waited for DeMeco Ryans. I don't think they'll continue to wait. This was the target from the start. They've interviewed him. They're going to interview him again next week. That's already been reported. I think Jonathan Gannon ends up as the next head coach of the Houston Texans, and I think it gets done next week. Speaking of getting done, this can get done sooner rather than later. Even though Jeff Saturday is the favorite right now on DraftKings, Raheem Morris plus 900, get it now. I heard he blew away Indianapolis Colts ownership, Jim Irsay and company. I think they want a defensive head coach to go with Chris Ballard. They've gone with the offensive guy, Frank Wright. That did not work out. He can poach the staff of Sean McVay, all those fired or let go coaches. They're just going to congregate to the Colts. And I think in that division, even with Trevor Lawrence, you can win with defense and running the football. Then we mentioned it, Dan Quinn. I think Dan Quinn is going to be the Denver Bronco head coach this time next week. I'm confident on it. I don't think Sean Payton's an option anymore. I think Dan Quinn is the one that they've had their eye on. I think they had a pre-existing love affair with Payton. And then when the talks got serious, compensation, draft picks, maybe Payton's control and clashing with George Patton, the GM there, I think they pivot to Quinn. And unfortunately, I feel like Quinn today, maybe a little bit of a leverage play to get an offer from the Denver Broncos. Shane Steichen is the favorite on DraftKings to be the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers. I think that's a done deal. He may interview one more time next week, but I think from the start, Bo, they have wanted an offensive guy. Steve Wilkes is still in contention. God love him, but they're not going to hire DeMeco Ryans. If they're not going to hire Steve Wilkes, I don't think they're serious about Sean Payton. I don't think New Orleans would have any indication of trading him within their own conference, in their own division, playing him twice a year. Shane Steichen makes sense. You go get a quarterback. You pair those two together. Their offense has been fantastic in Philadelphia. And then lastly, until I'm proven otherwise, there's our guy. He was in Arizona yesterday by all accounts, the first head coach in this really revamped interview process with the team, with Monti Ossenfort. Brian Flroes, in my opinion, is the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. He is not my fallback option. He is basically 1B to Sean Payton. I love Sean Payton. He's my choice, and this could change. If we get reports and sources out on Friday that Sean Payton and company had a banger of an interview and he came out impressed, then Flores is probably moved. But as of right now, until we have more information on how Thursday goes, Brian Flores, I believe, still is the best fit for Kyler Murray, for this team that had no accountability, and for this franchise that needs a facelift. And I believe with the combination of Monti Ossenfort, the revamped draft process with Dave Sears, Will Anderson, and Brian Flores, giddy up. Excited.
I hate your list. I really do. And here's why. Because my list, it's like I copied your work and got one wrong on purpose just so we didn't get caught by the teacher.
Wow!
4 out of 5 ain't bad. Here's why I went with DeMeco Ryans for the Houston Texans job. I know that it's iffy that he's even going to be available for a second interview with them, but he did interview last Friday with his former organization. But the Texans organization is a dumpster fire. I think only to Washington, it's the most dysfunctional franchise in the NFL, but they have that unique VIP access to the hottest newcomer to the NFL head coaching market, DeMeco Ryans. They've got that. It's like your scumbag cousin who knows a guy that can get you into the hottest club in Scottsdale, and the only reason he can get you in there is because he knows somebody. And that's what's the relationship between DeMeco Ryans and the Texans, and that's what could potentially get him as the next head coach there for the Texans. They just kind of fumbled their way into a legit head coach after just being futile for so many years beyond the Bill O'Brien years that fell short at the end after he traded DeAndre Hopkins. But no legit skills or reasons why Ryan should be tied to the Texans job beyond that. And then you look at the Colts. I mean, good luck. Just cue the circus music with this organization. The Colts could hire like a legit coaching candidate, or Jim Irsay could announce that his like trusted border collie is going to be the next head coach for this franchise. I mean, it's such a wild card. Like the most absolute wild card I've seen in a long time is this organization. It could be DeMeco Ryans, or Jim Irsay could anoint the reanimated corpse of Johnny Unitas. I don't know. Like however he's feeling that day, he's going to go with that for the new HC. So the Colts, they'll probably go with like a guy like Raheem Morris, a retread on the market, a guy who was there with Tampa for a couple seasons, and then he's made his way back as a pretty well-respected defensive coordinator, most recently with the Rams. I think he'll probably end up there. I've seen his name tied to their organization a couple times. And then Dan Quinn, I think that's one of the worst kept secrets as far as the head coaching candidates. I think he lands in Denver. He'll go reunite with Russell Wilson. They'll end up in 3rd and 4th place for the next 3 or 4 seasons, and that's going to be great. And then the Panthers, I got Shane Steichen here for the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think whoever wins this weekend in the NFC between the Eagles and the Niners, I think that's the direction that the Carolina Panthers organization is going to go for their head coach. They want to make a splash. They desperately want to make a splash. I think otherwise they would have stayed with a guy like Steve Wilkes, but instead they're going to go with the top coordinator from the team that's going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. So they'll either go maybe with Ryans or maybe go with the DC from Philly or OC here from Philly, who's the betting favorite right now. And then to your point, Brian Flores for the Arizona Cardinals. There's obviously connecting of the dots between him and his relationship with Monti Ossenfort. Obviously, Michael Bidwill loved him the last time he interviewed, and Adrian Wilson reportedly loves Brian Flores. So there's 3 people right now within the buildings, the walls of that building that really like Brian Flores. And to your point, if something happens with Payton and they pivot to that direction, that'd be great. But I think Flores would be a great consolation prize off the head coaching market for the Arizona Cardinals.
Isn't it funny? So first of all, Bo and I didn't know our list at all.
No.
And we talk regularly, but I didn't tell him what to put and vice versa. We came up with these lists on our own because this is generally what we believe is going to happen. But isn't it funny? Like November and December, not everybody, but a lot of people coming at us saying, you're going to get people's hopes up for Sean Payton. And now Sean Payton is literally coming to Arizona to meet with Michael Bidwill and Monti Ossenfort on Thursday. And we're predicting that Brian Flores is going to be the coach. Like, we want to be not pleasantly surprised. We want to be blown away with a Sean Payton announcement, but we're not going to bank on it until it happens, right? What is it saying? Always the bridesmaid, never the bride, right? We assume there's a leverage play at hand, whether it's Fox, whether it's Denver. I hope Michael Bidwill proves us wrong, Bo, because we have seen over the course of this offseason, he's checking every box. Everything that you wanted from Michael Bidwill, for the most part, he has done, outside of the little fudge up with DeMeco Ryans. But hey, if he gets Sean Payton, and Sean Payton has always been his guy, then in the grand scheme of things, the DeMeco Ryans pairing never really made sense to begin with. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens right now. But I'm going to tell you something else that's interesting. Overthecap.com, Bo, hard pivot here, has released their official projections for comp picks this year. Look, comp pick talk here on a Tuesday. What better way than be able to entice Sean Payton with a couple picks coming your way? For our audio-only listeners, Christian Kirk, the highest comp pick available. If you can remember, the Jacksonville Jaguars paid Christian Kirk about $5 billion to come play receiver for them. So the Cardinals get a 3rd-round pick. Then Chandler Jones, the 5th-round pick from the Las Vegas Raiders. It's the highest 5th-round pick. And then all the way at the bottom, how about our guy Chase Edmonds, who was traded midseason from Miami to Denver in that Bradley Chubb trade. Cardinals are set to have 3 comp picks. Then if you consider the fact they may trade DeAndre Hopkins, who knows, they could trade down, even though I wouldn't love that. The Cardinals are in a good spot here to re-up and retool and reload in what is supposed to be a loaded draft class. And you're talking about, you have the number 3 pick. You got a high pick on the beginning of Friday, pick 35. You got 2 picks now in the 3rd. You got a couple supplemental picks in the 5th and the 6th. They have no 7th rounders. That could change. Give me your thoughts on this quickly.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Kirk, it's beautiful, right? Because you thought a couple of weeks ago he was going to be one of the guys that was sinking your chances at getting Sean Payton after being a part of that comeback for the Jaguars against the Chargers. But Brandon Staley survived, so Christian Kirk, he kind of gives back a little bit to his former organization, and that's great. I mean, Monti Ossenfort is going to be looking for as many assets as he possibly can have to retool, rebuild this Cardinals organization. And the fact that you can you're like, what are you left with by letting these guys walk and not trying to secure them? But, Kirk's making ungodly amount of money, as you pointed out. So is a guy like Chandler Jones. It just wasn't, they could have made it work. Jones, it wouldn't have been the smart move. And then Chase Edmonds, who just had kind of a lost season, to get any kind of compensation for that. That's huge for this Arizona Cardinals team. 3 picks. I mean, you trade away a 6th-round pick basically for Trayvon Mullen. That gets kind of put right back into your draft capital for this season, for this draft season, and then you get you traded away a fifth, I believe, for a guy in Cody Ford. You get that back for Chandler Jones. So you pretty much get a full deck plus an extra third if you're the Arizona Cardinals. So you've got some ammo to really do some things here before the draft or whatever Monti Ossenfort wants to do with it.
And you said at least a third. I'm going to go on the record right now, and I'm going to say they're going to have multiple day 2 picks on top of that, because I do think they're going to trade DeAndre Hopkins. However, that gets a little messier, Bo Brock, with the announcement Bill O'Brien is the new offensive coordinator in New England. Yeah. And we were kind of connecting the dots, among others, that maybe the Patriots, the affinity for Hopkins via Bill Belichick, that would make some sense. DeAndre Hopkins has a no trade clause. He is not approving his trade to to New England to reunite with Bill O'Brien, the guy who ousted him out of Houston, who wouldn't pay him his money. You can scratch New England off that list.
What do you think the conversation is going to be? I mean, the reports was DeAndre Hopkins was going to meet with Monti Ossenfort this week.
Yeah.
Howard Balser saying that Sean Payton's meeting with Cardinals brass on Thursday. You think they'd meet with DeAndre Hopkins before that, or you think they meet with him on Friday and say, hey, we had a really good conversation with Sean Payton. What do you want to do? Do you want to stick around for this thing, or do you want to go try to really legitimately contend out of the gates next season? I'm curious to kind of hear what if we hear any reports coming out of that. The supplemental draft at Marco does not exist any longer. They discontinued it a couple seasons ago.
As harsh as this sounds, I don't think it's up to DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, yes, he has a no trade clause, but if the Cardinals say, hey, we're going to trade you to X team and they're going to pay you more money, he's going to accept the trade, assuming that they have a competent quarterback situation. I think it's up to the head coach and the GM. I think if they connect, or it's up to the GM alone, saying it's just not feasible to pay DeAndre Hopkins. So maybe they're going into these interviews with Dan Quinn, with Sean Payton, saying, we're going to trade DeAndre Hopkins and we're going to get you draft picks and we're going to clear up some cap space. Are you okay with that? Do you have any stark hesitation to that? Maybe you let Sean weigh in on that, because of course he's going to have personnel power. I'm not letting any other candidates weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've maintained I think it can be mutually beneficial for both sides, no doubt.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What his number is and what his age is going into age 31. There's an exception to the rule for the most part. It's Larry Fitzgerald, and there have been some great wide receivers that production fall off, and it happens to be around this time, and nobody is averse to that. So if the Arizona Cardinals can get some decent value, probably some pretty high value for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, and start to rebuild this thing. Sean Payton doesn't need a top-notch wide receiver to run his offense. Now, the defensive coordinators that you're looking at, depending on who the offensive coordinator is, like, you don't want to obviously create the crutch that Cliff Kingsbury and the Cardinals had for far too long with D-Hop, but you want to be able to be more versatile offensively than just relying you have a stacked deck as far as offensive line is completely healthy, everybody's good on your playmakers, and then your quarterback's completely healthy, because we saw the exact opposite of that, and you want to be able to compete when you're not at full strength. And I think that you have to start maybe giving away some of your luxuries, like an elite wide receiver, to create that type of depth.
Well, and just put the sides on two pieces of paper and just say, yes, he's an elite player and he can help us next September. But he's also missed time each of the last 2 seasons. He's expensive. He's 31 years old. He was, I think, purposely held out by the team in those final games of the regular season to keep him ready and healthy to pass a physical so they could trade him. I mean, add up all of the clues, and I don't know how you don't come out with the notion that they're going to move him. Jolton Shorts, friend of the program, said they were going to move him. He's meeting with the GM. I think that this meeting is probably like, we're going to try to get the best value for you, and we're going to put you on the best position to go contend, maybe for a Super Bowl or to elevate your already prestigious Hall of Fame level career.
And entertain us with a list. Give us a list.
Right.
Where would you want to go?
100%. 100%. And there
Baltimore,
was word.
Easy. Tennessee. You want to go to Tennessee? I mean, AFC preferably, but who cares?
ESPN, Jeremy Fowler had an insider article yesterday or today that basically said that he thought New England could be interested, even with Bill O'Brien. That remains to be seen. Tennessee could be interested. And he said a first rounder might be rich, but a second rounder, I'm paraphrasing, is realistic. And I think that that's kind of the ballpark we've been this entire time. New England picks in like the mid 40s. Send that pick and maybe a fourth. Suddenly you're cooking with gas with pick 35, a pick in the 40s. You're the top of the third round pick. I mean, these should all be future starters for Sean Payton or Dan Quinn or Brian Flores or whomever. Because again, we talked about this. And you're going to have to ship compensation for Payton. That's a great point in the chat. Like, you're going to have to sell off some pieces to be able to acquire Sean Payton, but you're not building what you're building now for 2023. In some senses you are, and hopefully, please football gods, this rookie class is going to play more than the rookie classes under Steve Keim their first year. But you're building this group out. You're taking Will Anderson, presumably, or Jalen Carter to be an ass kicker for the next 5 to 10 years. Like, this is not all or nothing 2023. You don't have Kyler Murray to start the year. So keeping an expensive DeAndre Hopkins, you'll already be limited, learning a new scheme. I mean, go look at Brian Flores' first year in Miami. They started slow and then they ramped up, right? I mean, the peak of this roster, maybe at the end of next year or in 2024, it's like, okay, now we're really cooking. Now we're back to contention. Kyler Murray's ready to go. You have to be forward thinking. And the problem with Keim was that it was, let's just make reactionary moves. Let's go all in. I want to get a Super Bowl.
I think he can compete any year, every year. Like, no, dude, that's not how it works.
Not every team is trying to win the Super Bowl tomorrow.
Right.
And the Cardinals built the foundation of this roster on sticks and spit. It was not foundationally sound.
Right.
It wasn't. It was old players. It was veterans. It was snap trades. It was bloated salaries. And then it was compounded and made worse by missing on draft picks, taking Robert Nkemdiche over Chris Jones, busting on Jonathan Cooper, playing Hassan Reddick at off-ball linebacker. I mean, we've said it ad nauseum. They just got to get back to basics, man.
Yeah. Keep it simple, stupid, right? And fortunately for the Arizona Cardinals, I think they got a really smart guy in the front office who's going to be heading that up from here on forward. I see Michael Thomas's name in the chat quite a bit. Jose brought him up. Look, Michael Thomas is nice. Michael Thomas from a couple of years ago was great. He hasn't been the same since. Go find the next Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas was a second-round pick. You get a second-round pick in return for DeAndre Hopkins. Go out and draft the next guy that's going to rule the slot for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, Joel in the chat. Cooper Kupp was a third. A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, right? DK Metcalf. I mean,
and what's his name? Daniel Jeremiah's first mock draft, that kid that was running all up and down the Fiesta Bowl for TCU
wideout. Yeah.
Quentin Johnston fell out of the first round.
Yeah, there you go.
Looking pretty good.
You're going to get a first round talent if you stick and pick at pick 35. That's going to be a player that was projected presumably to go in the first round. We got
what are we talking, like 5'6" wide receiver out of I don't know. What are we looking at? Like Valdosta State? We're looking at those guys.
No, this is a time for healing. We don't want to do that. I hope Steve's doing well. I hope he's getting the help that he needs. We're getting the help that we need by, I think, Mako Bidwill getting it done. We're going to be live at Four Peaks tomorrow. Come by, chat it up. Special 4:30 start time with myself, Bo Brock. Hey, like this video. If you like what you're seeing, subscribe to PHNX Sports on YouTube. And most importantly, subscribe to PHNX Cardinals wherever you get your podcast. We don't only do live shows. We do audio-only shows. We did a loaded show on Sunday night, breaking all this down. We're bringing in special guests throughout the course of the offseason. We will be ready with breaking news when it happens, if it happens. And hell, we're breaking news here with our guy Howard Balzer, breaking the Sean Payton news. Go to gophnx.com. Become a diehard right now. Get 20% off all future events. Cop some free gear from the PHNX merchandise locker, a hat, a T-shirt. PHNX Cardinals, we don't take the offseason off. No. We own the offseason, Bo Brock.
Absolutely. Yeah. Howard actually broke down what it all meant for Sean Payton, the news he broke himself yesterday. Highly recommend you check out that article. Go phnx.com and hang out with us tomorrow. Did we get to the super chat from Brian? Do we want to get it before we get out of here?
Let's get
Brian in the super chat. Big thank you to you. Need to see Bidwill wink at Bo when Payton is introed. Yeah. I mean, it would just complete it, right? Because when I asked him about it after he fired Cliff Kingsbury, we saw that wry smile from him.
Do we still have that footage here, producer?
I don't think we
don't
do
have it anymore.
I don't believe we do, and that's okay. Because it's playing over and over in my head.
Embedded in my brain.
Heart.
You know, You know what else is embedded in my brain? Casting a wide net with the Arizona Cardinals head coach.
That's absolutely right. We're not advocating for fishing for dolphins, by the way, just because we've got a flipper noise in there.
Don't come after us, PETA. Just cast it. That the Photoshop on my. Can we see that one more time, Emma? Bidwill looks authentic there. Like
it
that,
does.
That's the best part. The head.
Thank you.
That's tough, but that's also tough for anybody if you've ever used Photoshop. Thank you guys for hanging out on this Tuesday. We're ready to go whenever breaking news comes our way. In the meantime, like and subscribe for Bo Brock. I'm Johnny Venerable. We'll see you live tomorrow at Four Peaks. Be well, everybody.